Alright, I am back with another Destiny 2 video, and though I said I would push my Iron Banner video to today, because it was recorded before yesterday's news, still think I have to talk about yesterday's news some more. This, of course, is about the IGN article that talked about very low morale and all these benefit cuts and scalebacks that Bungie is doing right now, along with the news that if Bungie's finances do not improve, Sony has the capability, as part of their purchase of Bungie, to take over the company completely, dissolve the board, and do whatever with it under their direct leadership, as opposed to Bungie being an independent subsidiary. And there's a lot of doom and gloom around this, understandably, because it is not a great situation. And fundamentally, I do think it is factual that I don't see how things could turn around anywhere close to soon. Everything is banking on the final shape, but there are going to be significant revenue losses and player declines before that in this really extended 6-month season. And then after the final shape, no matter how well it sells, there will be drop off after that. So I am almost operating under the assumption that this may come to pass where Sony eventually takes over Bungie. What I'm starting to realize is I think executives are just trying to save their own skin here by making all these cuts, by doing layoffs in order to avoid the Sony situation, because they want to keep their jobs and they don't want to, get booted off the board or whatever, which sucks if that's actually what's happening here. Today I wrote about all the possible options about what could happen if Sony takes over Bungie. There's good case scenarios, bad case scenarios. But today I kind of wanted to talk about the Optimist case for Bungie and Destiny 2 here, because there is, the worst case idea that Sony says screw it and they cancel Bungie's games and they feed Bungie into their machine to help all their other studios, and the company essentially ceases to exist, and that involves a lot of layoffs, and it's terrible. It's very bad. That would be horrific. I don't really see things playing out that way, for a few reasons. I think that this isn't a good thing. Obviously, going forward, it may end up being either not as bad as we think, or it could potentially be a good thing. One of the first and obvious things is that Sony could replace Bungie's currently bad leadership with better leadership. And that could be, promoting internal people who are doing a good job, who are well-liked and respected, who are named Joe Blackburn, and replacing, the problematic people with people who would help improve the company, improve morale. They could bring in their own people, where Sony does have a lot of talented people, even if they are not, live service experts. They know how to run AAA games, or, there's plenty of other people in the industry that maybe could jump over from whatever company they're at and help lead Bungie into the future. And regardless of kind of what happens with leadership, it's more of a question of Bungie's investment, or Sony's investment in Bungie, and where they would see this going in the future. Because I didn't realize how recent this was. Sony only bought Bungie in February of 2022, so we're not even at 2 years of this yet, and we're already in this crisis mode and whatever. I do not think Sony wants to just write off Bungie, or I really don't think Sony wants to be the company that bought Bungie and then promptly dissolved one of the most storied game developers from all the years of Halo to Destiny. I don't think they want that, to be on their tombstone, so to speak. Even if I think we've come to realize that a lot of this is Bungie's fault, management's fault at the very least, it would still kind of reflect poorly on Sony, whereas, Microsoft is buying all these places and they're releasing, pretty good games, and they have Call of Duty and, Starfield set player count records, blah, 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 blah. Sony's biggest purchase lately has been Bungie, and it would be kind of a disaster for them if under their watch Bungie just essentially collapsed, or they were forced to fold it. Secondly, Marathon. Sony does have this very strong stated desire to get into the live service space, and they originally said that they're going to have 12 games out in the next few years. Now that's been reduced to 6, and 6 more are delayed, but it stands to reason that Marathon is one of their best hopes and best bets for a actual quality live service game. Obviously, I think we don't know all that much about Marathon, but what do we know? Bungie has made Halo, one of the most popular multiplayer games in history, even if a lot of the people are not there anymore. But Bungie did also make Destiny, which, despite the state of the game currently, has lasted 10 years and has had a significant, PvP component. And if people are still complaining about it now, guess what? You're still playing PvP 10 years later. And I think everyone would agree that, despite Destiny's faults, its gunplay, its movement, its abilities like that, it is one of the best feeling shooters in the game. As such, it stands to reason that Marathon, which is currently using a bunch of the people who did a bunch of the good Destiny 2 things to make its multiplayer, really has a good shot of being a quality shooter. And it is a very competitive space. It is a bit of a risk to launch a AAA extraction shooter in an industry that is not exactly rife with extraction shooters. And this is not exactly going after Tarkov directly, as that's a little niche. It does seem like if Sony truly does want to get into the live service space, that they need to let Bungie cook, as it were, and see Marathon 2 release. Currently, that is allegedly going to be in 2025. So we are, if we're almost 2 years into this deal, it may be almost another 2 years at least until Marathon comes out. And that is a lot of runway that Bungie would need to get there. Granted, Sony lets a lot of its developers have a lot of runway. They have these single-player games that are years between these single-player releases, and those companies are not expected to, be printing money in the interim. I think that's one of Sony's issues, is that they wish they were printing money in the interim. But it is not unreasonable, for Bungie to ask for a couple more years to get it right, to make sure it launches in a great state. And I think Sony would be unwise to kill Marathon or something like that, or I don't know what else Bungie's incubating besides that one Gummy Bears game, but Marathon specifically, that would seem ill-advised no matter what the state of Bungie is right now, given what's been invested in it, given Sony's stated ambitions in the space. I would have to imagine that they're going to let Marathon survive. Destiny 2. This is a whole other can of worms, and it's a very complicated situation because even if there's runway leading to Marathon, Sony also does not want Destiny 2 just consistently losing money during that entire time. And that is apparently what is happening with all these revenue misses, with these, dire financials that could involve the takeover in the first place. And yet, I cannot imagine Sony killing Destiny either. Not the current game and not the IP in general, certainly. What feels like the most likely scenario to me is probably some sort of reduction in scope, which could be bad in its own right, because if players are not engaged enough now, are they going to be engaged enough when there's even less stuff to play if the scope of the game is scaled back? Obviously, it's already been scaled back in many areas. We all reference Forsaken and just the absurd amount of content that was added to that, compared to what we get now. And that was the result of 100% of Bungie working on it and 2 Activision support studios working on it at the same time, and we've never been anywhere close to that since. However, it is very apparent that the current state of the game cannot sustain itself. Bungie is producing, PvP is being ignored, Gambit's being ignored, but the PvE content they're producing is massive. Has anyone been paying attention to Seasons the last year or two? The stuff they're putting out is sizable every 3 months. Well, 6 months this time. And then the expansions, Lightfall was not great, but it is a ton of work to put out a huge expansion every year. And Witch Queen was good, and Final Shape is going to be good, probably. And the sheer volume of this, in addition to how much it costs to make this, without some sort of really high consistent player base, which is kind of both naturally declining in time now and then declining precipitously in the wake of Lightfall, the economics don't really work. And I think that's what we're seeing. And I think this is why Microsoft passed in the first place, because the spend compared to revenue is really kind of, teetering on the edge there. And when things are well, it could be making a lot of money. And clearly it did make money, or else we wouldn't still be playing Destiny, 10 years later. But as players decline and costs increase, as they no doubt have over time, that becomes a very, very serious issue. And the game is not monetized to support this. I know we think the game is over monetized, and it is over monetized, but it's not monetized in the correct way for long-term sustainability. You have games like Final Fantasy XIV and World of Warcraft that, have dedicated subscription models that players have been locked into for years at this point, and that is a way to essentially consistently print money in a way that selling, $100 upfront season or year pass things like Destiny does is not really the same, even if it kind of operates similarly to a subscription model. You can still buy stuff independently, you can buy seasons independently, you can dip in, you can dip out, but you're not paying a monthly sub for that. It is also not like something like Genshin Impact, where that game also releases ridiculously huge content updates every few weeks, practically. Like, it's the amount of content Genshin puts out is probably even more than Destiny overall. But that game is supported by the most predatory monetization model on Earth, the gacha loot box gambling model, where you can pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to max out your 5-star characters, and they add new ones every time. And like, Destiny, for all its faults, does not do that. So Destiny is reduced to selling these $100 things every year and then really banking on Eververse microtransactions, but those have gone so far to the point where there's no more blood to squeeze from that stone. Like, everyone is checking out. Even whales like myself are not spending anymore because it's become too much. So without the kind of revenue model to sustain that, it's this really weird balance of like, okay, well, what do we open up for free? What do we charge more for? Like, is this sustainable? Is this viable? And like, we all think we know the answers, myself included. I just, before this news yesterday, I wrote a whole thing about Bungie should make transmog free. And I've said, Bungie should have released Forsaken for free and release these old expansions for free. But it's balanced, because is the money you're losing from old expansion sales offset by new players coming in and spending things? Maybe, maybe not. But the overall point is that I think Destiny in its current form may be viewed as too expensive to sustain. And I do wonder if it will move away from the live model based on like kind of what we've seen. And that could be, again, smaller, more infrequent content drops as opposed to weekly story beats and weekly or, monthly holiday events and, blah, blah, blah. Like, all of this stuff just never ending, which, again, like, they're building the road as they drive on it. Like, it is crazy to produce content at that pace while now also simultaneously developing other things. And I wonder if the plan is that Destiny could end up just sort of taking a break. Again, I think this is too valuable an IP for Sony to just be like, screw it, Destiny's over, whatever. It feels like the more logical thing to me, and I've even talked about this before, is just sort of ending Destiny 2 for a while and, revisiting it some years later, maybe at the beginning of the next console generation, for a full Destiny 3. And this would allow Bungie's focus to shift even further to Marathon to make sure that comes out, and then, circling back, devoting more resources toward bringing Destiny back to life with a fully new game. Maybe they can go back into the live model to some extent. Maybe not, because maybe the live model for a game like this is ultimately not sustainable, and we are in a kind of dire loop where, unless you have the most, crazy high player counts with big per person spending on things, like, it's not really going to work. And if there's a Destiny 3, and if that would be a starting point for a whole bunch of people to launch back into the game and create that situation again, maybe they can go back to it. But it is hard to believe that after the final shape, things are going to increase. Like, it, and if revenue, if player count does not increase substantially, and they're still putting out the same level of content they are now, it's never going to make money. They're never going to make enough revenue for Sony, and profit, cost, all of that stuff is not going to work in their favor. And in that situation, they would have to hope Marathon is a huge hit, so then Marathon could fund Destiny if Destiny's losing money. And that is my question for Sony, is if the problem with Destiny right now is this high burn rate, is its inability to hit revenue targets because of declining players, what is Sony's plan then? Do they just replace leadership and think that new leaders will do better and make better decisions to increase player count? In a perfect world, that is, probably what everyone would hope for. Everyone at Bungie, players, just hope the game gets better and can still deliver lots of content. But I also wonder about shift in scope, shift in concept, shift maybe away from live, or shift away from the IP in general for a period of time. Really just putting it into maintenance mode. I could see what would Destiny in maintenance mode look like? It would just sort of exist in perpetuity as most of the free to play things. I could see them doing seasons that are literally just a battle pass of optional cosmetics if you want, and then very, very minor events and just people hanging out and playing Crucible and Gambit and running strikes and stuff. But like, none of these huge story launches, none of these, enormous expansions for a while. It would just be kind of dead, but dead in a sense where maybe people still, spend money on battle passes or some armor every so often. But they are not, like Bungie and Sony are not spending zillions of dollars on pumping out these enormous content drops all the time. I don't think that's a healthy, permanent place for Destiny to be, but if we're talking about sort of a bridged gap between these constant revenue losses and declines and spending, and then trying to make Destiny healthy overall, that is what I think, we might get to. I don't want to see Bungie dissolve. That would be a terrible decision, I think, on Sony's part, to not have Marathon come out, to kill Destiny as a brand, to kill Bungie as a developer and feed them into their other like, that is the worst case scenario, I think, both for Bungie, for players, and kind of for Sony too. It just, that would be a nightmare to see unfold. So I am choosing to believe that we will not see the end of Bungie, the end of Destiny as an IP, or the killing of Marathon before it comes out. I believe we at least have more than a year of Destiny left. I think they're going to do the episodes. I think they have to see how the episodes perform. I think Marathon will see release because I don't think Bungie or Sony wants to have had Bungie invest all this time and money into Marathon, which should be a really promising live game for them, and then just kill it before that happens. And I don't think Sony wants to be the place that killed Bungie, even if Bungie's bad luck is a result of poor management decisions across many different companies. Microsoft, Activision, independents. All of these things keep kind of happening, and I think there's one common thread there, and it's management. So, I don't know. It's a bad situation, and what I want to see more than anything is no more layoffs. And it's not really up to us. Like, if, one thing from the report is that if the final shape does not sell well or does not sell well enough, there will probably be more layoffs. They have said that pretty explicitly. But, we're not, it's not a GoFundMe. We're not just, if you don't want to buy the final shape, if you're not motivated to, you're not going to. And it's sort of out of our hands in that degree. And it's up to, kind of Bungie to turn things around and get people excited about it again. And I do think there are a number of people excited about the final shape because they want to see the end of the saga. They've committed to it for this long. I have heard really, really good things about the final shape and how it's coming together. But again, even if that's true, so many people are saying it's like, this is the end of the saga, like, I'll move on after this. So the future of Destiny after that is what I think is more in question, and we'll see what happens. But it's really complicated. It's a very complicated situation. And in the short term, I don't see how we're going to see anything but further player declines, further revenue declines, which, that's internal stuff, so we may not see that reported, but we will be able to see player declines once we get, 4 or 5 months into this huge season. We'll see what the mid-season content stuff is, whether that's paid or free or whatever it is, and then we'll see how the final shape launches. And I don't believe they're going to kill the episodes, so we will see how the episodes launch after. After that, we are sort of in uncharted territory, both with how Marathon is coming together and then how Destiny continues from there. But I don't think we're going to hit the worst case scenario here. I think there may be a significant shift in how Destiny operates, but I am hoping that things can come together to the point where it doesn't need to be, DEFCON 1 level disaster. So we will see. It's going to take a long time to kind of figure out how this works. I know this has been all very depressing to read. It is certainly very depressing, and I'm flashing back to when this all was happening with the layoffs in the first place, and now there's, additional things like this coming out. But yeah, I'm still playing, earning my Iron Banner ornaments and farming coil and stuff. So as I said, I'll be there till the lights are out, but I certainly don't blame players that have moved on, and I am wondering what gets people to come back and what form that takes. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.